HOA, Karen thought stealing a garden hose at 1:47 a.m. was harmless, until the pressure flipped. One twist of the timer, and the cameras she'd rinsed with stolen water exploded in fluorescent pink. Paint dripped from her surveillance empire, like guilt under a blacklight. The hose didn't just spray water, it sprayed evidence. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where you watching from. Share in the comments below. When I bought the place, I told myself I was done with noise. Not just the obvious kind, honking cars, thudding bass lines, midnight arguments over parking spots, but the deeper kind. The kind that lives in expectation, obligation, that constant pressure to keep up, fit in, say yes when you mean no. This house was supposed to be the opposite of all that. Tucked at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, framed by trimmed hedges and cautious mailboxes, it wasn't much by realtor standards. Single story, cracked driveway, slightly leaning mailbox post. But to me, it was peace. A blank canvas with a view of the sky, and no upstairs neighbors, stomping around in high heels at 3 a.m. I spent my first week unpacking slowly, intentionally, planted herbs along the front path, built 2 raised beds in the backyard for tomatoes and snap peas, set up a 55-gallon rain barrel I brought with me in the move, painted blue with little white sun decals my niece helped me stencil last summer. The hose bib out back was older, but solid brass, vintage, almost elegant in its way. I attached a flexible green coil hose to it, the kind that shrinks when not in use. Simple, reliable. That first Saturday morning, I stood barefoot on the damp grass, tea in hand, as the morning mist caught golden in the light. I turned on the spigot. The water flowed with a steady hiss. I remember smiling at how clean it felt. Quiet water. My water. But then came the little things. By week 2, I noticed the pressure wasn't quite right in the mornings. Weak spray. Occasional sputters. I chalked it up to mineral buildup or an air pocket in the hose. Then I started finding the hose slightly uncoiled, damp, warm, like it had been used and left out, then quickly wound back up by someone who didn't quite care how they found it. I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe it was condensation. Maybe the sun warmed it. Maybe a squirrel or stray cat brushed it in the night. But it happened again. The pressure drop. The uncoiled hose. Then I heard it. It was just past 1:40 a.m. I'd gotten up for water and paused in the hallway. There was a sound, faint but deliberate. A soft hiss, like distant spraying. Not close enough to be inside my yard. Not quite far enough to ignore. I stepped outside barefoot. The air was cool and quiet. Moonlight spilled across the lawn. Nothing moved. I walked along the fence line, barefoot, careful not to make a sound. The closer I got to the corner near the HOA-maintained path, the clearer the sound became. Spray. Pause. Spray again. But by the time I reached the hedge, it stopped. Silence. I crouched, hand brushing the base of the hose. Still warm. And in that moment, something shifted in me. A tickle of doubt. The kind that grows in the back of your mind like a weed, slow, persistent, and unwelcome. This wasn't a faulty spigot. Someone was using my hose. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but in a neighborhood where fences were sacred and sprinkler schedules were hotly debated in HOA bulletins, someone creeping into a yard at night wasn't just rude. It was calculated. Still, I didn't react. Not yet. I didn't yell. I didn't post about it online. I just made a note in my phone. 1:42 a.m., possible hose activity. I went back inside, locked the door, and poured another glass of water. Because something told me the story behind the weak pressure was just beginning to build, and I wasn't about to be caught off guard when it finally burst. The next night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed listening, waiting. My window cracked open just enough to let the night air carry in the sounds of the neighborhood crickets, the occasional hum of a car in the distance, the ticking of my bedside clock. At 1:39 a.m., I heard it again, that soft hiss. A steady stream of water too precise to be a leak. And once again, by the time I slipped outside, the noise had stopped. This time, the hose was still warm and slightly wet. That's when the suspicion hardened into resolve. I wasn't crazy. Someone was using my hose. And I was going to find out who. The next day, I went to the hardware store. Bought 2 motion-activated sensors and a 1080p trail cam with infrared mode. No Wi-Fi. No cloud sync. Just SD card footage. Time-stamped and silent. I mounted the cam behind the planter box, angled toward the garden spigot. One motion sensor went beneath the porch light. The other tucked under the hydrangea bush where no one ever looked. For 2 nights, nothing. Then, on the 3rd night, at exactly 1:41 a.m., the motion log pinged. I checked the footage the next morning. There she was. Floral robe, house slippers, hair in a loose bun. Karen Ramsey, the HOA president. I watched as she tiptoed into my yard like she owned it. Which, I suppose in her mind, she did. She picked up the coil hose like it was hers, turned the spigot like she had every right, and calmly dragged it toward the path beyond the property line. She rinsed the decorative stone edging along the walking path, sprayed down the HOA's entrance sign. She even hosed off the sidewalk. Then, and I swear I couldn't make this up, she knelt down and gave the tires of her white Lexus SUV a quick rinse. My water. My hose. Every night. The next day, I didn't knock. I waited. Sure enough, at exactly 10:15 a.m., her little HOA golf cart-style patrol buggy rolled up the street, the front emblazoned with that smug blue and gold Sandpiper hollow board chair logo. She waved. I didn't. Instead, I stepped onto the sidewalk and held up a still image from the video, printed in full color. She slowed. Stop. Her smile faltered. You're trespassing, I said. And stealing water, she scoffed. It's not trespassing, that's common use landscaping access. And your hose is visible from the sidewalk. Not to mention, it's not even code compliant. That vintage bib? It doesn't meet HOA standards for pressure-safe flow. I blinked. So because my equipment isn't to your liking, you decided to just help yourself. I rinsed some things for the benefit of the community, she said. The words so practiced they sounded like they were pulled from an HOA pamphlet. And water isn't personal property, it's connected to the municipal grid. Technically, we all pay into it. I stared at her. Karen, it's on my bill. She didn't flinch. Then maybe consider replacing the hose. We can even discuss a reimbursement at the next HOA meeting, but let's not be dramatic. Then she rolled away. Just like that. No apology. No embarrassment. Just a subtle smirk and a disappearing floral robe. I stood there for a long minute watching her cart vanish into the curve of the cul-de-sac. She wasn't just entitled, she felt untouchable. But what she didn't know, couldn't possibly guess, was that I wasn't planning to argue with her. Because this wasn't about the hose anymore. This was about principle. About boundary. And if she wanted to keep touching what wasn't hers, then maybe it was time the hose touched back. I wasn't done. Karen's excuse had been bold, but flimsy. And flimsy things tear when you start pulling. So I pulled. I started at the base of the spigot, checked the fittings, the valve, the flow regulator. Everything looked normal, until I followed the hose line all the way to where I usually stored it, looped neatly around the hook near the porch steps. Except, there was a subtle kink in the line, a slight shift in the mulch that didn't match the rest of the garden bed. I crouched, brushing aside the top layer of wood chips. And there it was, the glint of brass beneath soil. A splitter. One end fed the standard hose loop. The other disappeared beneath the hedge line. A thin, coiled connector threaded into a completely separate hose. This one matte black and dirt camouflaged. I followed it. Down through the side garden, beneath the dense boxwood row, and under the HOA's east boundary fence. The deeper I dug, the angrier I got. This wasn't some casual midnight rinse. This was engineered, planned, installed while I slept or before I'd even moved in. And then I found the timer, tucked behind a flat decorative rock, sealed in a plastic cover, and wired to the splitter. A silent flow irrigation controller, digital, battery-operated, and pre-programmed. I popped the panel. 1:42 a.m., cycle A, 4 minutes. Fartle 1:47 a.m., cycle B, 6 minutes. Watsir 1:59 a.m., cycle C, 3 minutes. Each entry was stamped, precise. Who sets up a 3-stage irrigation cycle using someone else's hose unless they're running something more mechanical? I widened the trench and kept tracking the line. It ran under the shared fence, past the community herb bed, and straight to the HOA's pool enclosure. That's when it clicked. I'd walked past those cameras a dozen times. The HOA installed a full system 2 years ago, high-angle security cams to monitor common areas, supposedly for safety. I remember Karen bragging about them at a community mixer. Every lens is high definition. Infrared. We'll always know who's where. And now I knew how they stayed so spotless. She'd been using my water to spray down the HOA's surveillance cameras. My pressure. My hose. My bill. I checked the mounting points. Sure enough, each camera had a tiny misting nozzle beneath it. The kind you'd see on greenhouse humidity sprayers. Connected to narrow tubing, and that tubing ran directly from the stealth hose. Karen wasn't just rinsing signs or sidewalks. She was running a covert cleaning rig on a timer from my faucet to keep her precious all-seeing cameras free of pollen, dust, and dew. Unbelievable. All that sanctimonious talk about aesthetic uniformity and shared community standards, and she'd been siphoning my utility like I was a public works department. No wonder she'd gotten defensive. No wonder she acted like I was the unreasonable one. She didn't expect to be caught. But now that I had physical evidence, not just footage, but fittings, timers, tubing, the whole rig, this wasn't just petty. It was targeted, calculated, and worse, it was hidden for one reason, because she knew it wouldn't hold up under daylight. But I wasn't about to storm into the boardroom with a pile of damp garden hose. No, that would be too easy, too fast. And if Karen liked her cameras so much, maybe it was time she saw how they liked being sprayed. Only not with water. I had a different idea. A more permanent color. And the next cycle was just hours away. I picked it up at a salvage hardware outlet, part of a pressure wash rig that someone had abandoned for parts. With a few adjustments and a steel bracket mount, I aimed the nozzle just above the hedgerow line, angled to match the sightline of the HOA's corner security camera. The reservoir, not water, but a quart of washable fluorescent pink marking paint, the kind utility crews use to flag underground cables. Biodegradable, bright as a warning flare. Shows up like neon on infrared and leaves a pastel fingerprint that glows under UV light for weeks. Exactly what I needed. I tested the valve manually twice. Triggered once with my garden faucet. The pressure sprayer hissed, then spat. A perfect arc. Right over the hedge. It splashed the back fence first. Second test hit a garden gnome and painted it fuchsia. Perfect trajectory. Then I set the trap. Backflow valve re-engaged. Paint chamber full. Smart module programmed. Trigger if pressure exceeded 20 psi between 1:45 and 2:00 a.m. I even angled a dummy hose loop to make the setup look untouched. Now I waited. 1:43 a.m. Silence. 1:45 a.m. Nothing. 1:46 a.m. The telltale click from the solenoid valve. 1:47 a.m. A hiss. A sputter. Then PHFS. The pressure sprayer came alive. I couldn't see it directly from my bedroom window, but I saw the glow, like a soft pink mist catching the porch lights beyond the clubhouse. And then the chaos. The next morning, I took a slow walk past the HOA pool entrance. Didn't look out of place. Just another early riser with coffee in hand. But what I saw, the camera housings once metallic silver, now looked like cotton candy exploded on them. Swirls and splashes of fluorescent pink painted across the lens domes, running down the wires. Even the sidewalk bore splatter marks like a street artist had lost control of their spray. And Karen? Standing by the pool gate with a wet cloth in one hand and a stunned expression that didn't quite know whether to panic or pretend. This was all fine. She hadn't seen me yet, so I walked right past her, nodded politely. "Everything okay with the neighborhood cameras?" I asked, voice calm. She blinked. "There was some sort of vandalism," she muttered. "We think it's kids." "Strange," I replied, sipping. "I thought that hose system was protected." Her eyes narrowed. And in that look, I saw the flicker of fear. Not because she knew exactly what I'd done, but because she suspected I knew, and didn't care who else found out. Because the cameras didn't just record, they reveal. And now, they were covered in pink. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need a confrontation. All I needed was one valve, one trap, and a message that sprayed itself. Because Karen liked control, but I had found the pressure point. And I had just turned the handle. The first night was silent. The pressure dipped, the valve held. Nothing triggered. I thought maybe I'd overestimated her. Maybe Karen Ramsey, self-appointed queen of code compliance, had finally backed off after years of running the HOA like a gated monarchy. Maybe a warning mist of resistance had been enough. But Karen wasn't built to walk away quietly. She just missed her target the first night. The second night, bullseye. 1:47 a.m., the sensor clicked. I sat up in bed, eyes already trained on the infrared feed from the hedgecam. A quick hiss. Then the arc, a graceful spray of fluorescent pink mist, climbing over the fence like a rising tide of karma. By dawn, 3 of the HOA's pristine, polished white security domes were glowing like bubblegum. Direct hits. And the best part, washable paint or not, the sun had baked it in by 10 a.m. Karen's reaction wasn't immediate. She didn't know yet. But the pool cam caught the moment she routed the clubhouse corner in her usual morning circuit, wearing that lemon-colored windbreaker and a face full of certainty. That certainty didn't last long. She froze mid-step, stared, took 2 steps back, like the camera might bite, then reached for her phone with the kind of frantic speed reserved for break-ins or house fires. By noon, 2 maintenance guys were up on ladders, no badges, just local day workers who'd clearly been called in under the radar. They scrubbed, wiped, even tried pressure washing. But the paint clung. The following day, brand new domes appeared. Glossy, untouched, and just like clockwork, that night, PHFF, another perfect spray. The new domes didn't stand a chance. It was poetry. Hot pink, high-pressure poetry. By the end of the week, 5 security cameras, including the one near the HOA mailbox cluster, had been hit. The entrance sign bore a faint speckle, like a flamingo had sneezed on it. Karen lost it. She called an emergency board meeting, sent out emails, flagged time-sensitive, and printed flyers taped to every mailbox that read, "Vandalism alert. If you see something, report immediately. Community safety is non-negotiable. We will be reviewing all footage." Footage. That was the punchline. Because the cameras had been compromised. Not destroyed, not disabled, just humiliated. Like little white eyes now coated in a blush of guilt they couldn't blink away. At the emergency meeting, Karen paced in front of the podium like a nervous attorney. She blamed outsiders, teen pranks, and even floated the theory that someone was launching paint balloons from the creek bed. "This is a coordinated attack," she shouted, smacking her notes on the podium. "It is calculated, it is disruptive, and it is happening under our noses." I sat in the 3rd row, sipping tea from a travel mug. The woman next to me whispered, "Maybe the cameras caught it." I almost laughed. There was no forced entry. No broken panels. No cracked wires, just pressure-activated poetic justice from a hose that was never hers to use. Karen's voice cracked mid-sentence as she read off a motion to install motion-activated spotlight deterrents. You could tell she was losing grip, not just on the situation, but on her image. Because there were no vandals, no teenagers,
no one to catch.
Only the reflection in her own HOA-installed security dome, glowing a defiant shade of neon pink. And in that reflection, she saw something worse than a criminal. She saw a neighbor she underestimated. And then twist. A subtle hiss. A slight delay. And then, PASSHHHH, direct hit. The nozzle activated mid-adjustment, spraying up from its angled clip, hitting her wrist, bouncing off her forearm, and catching her across the blouse, jawline, and just barely the front of her hair. She fell backward, scrambled up, slipped slightly. Did she scream? I couldn't tell, but the expression on her face, crystal, shock, rage, embarrassment. Like a dog caught with its nose in the bird feeder. She bolted, not toward the clubhouse, but toward the side access gate. A full retreat. The hose dripped behind her, spraying an occasional mist as if waving goodbye. I stopped the feed, rewound, watched it again. Then again, slower, frame by frame. each droplet of paint catching the infrared light like pixelated confetti. And the best part? It wasn't even my camera that got her best. Because 15 feet behind her, mounted on the same wall she'd so lovingly rinsed every morning, was one of her HOA cameras, still fully operational, still uploading, still recording at 1080p, motion triggered. She'd been caught by her own security system. I saved both feeds, labeled them cleanly, Karen Cam, Pinksident Num 4.p4. Hedge Cam Reverse Spray, Full SEC. Timestamped, geotagged, synchronized to the millisecond. I didn't share them. Not yet. That would have been too easy. Too soon. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about documentation. Leverage. A paint-slicked HOA queen caught in the act, blaming vandals and board meets, while her own night vision dome captured her trespass in high definition. And the smear of pink across her right cheek? Chef's kiss. So I did what any well-prepared neighbor would do. I backed it up. To 2 separate encrypted drives. To a cloud folder with a trigger key. To an offline USB hidden in the garden shed. Just in case. Because Karen hadn't learned her lesson yet. But she would. One frame at a time. I didn't need fireworks. Just a faucet, a few logs, and one form, filed with the right agency. See, it turns out the County Utility Oversight Department has a particular interest in water use anomalies, especially when someone's pulling hundreds of gallons a week from an unregistered line. I didn't scream. I didn't post. I simply submitted a quiet, polite inquiry. Hi, I'm a resident of Sandpine Hollow. I've noticed unusual nighttime water use originating from my private exterior spigot. I've attached motion-captured footage, time-coded water pressure logs, and photos of an unauthorized splitter linked into a public irrigation setup. Could this be investigated under Section 9 for unauthorized water source usage for non-commercial municipal property? I included the best still frame from Karen's garden hose ballet, pink mist and all, alongside time-stamped images of her rinsing the sidewalk at 1:42 a.m. 2 weeks later, a white Ford with a county seal and 2 field engineers rolled down the cul-de-sac. They didn't knock. They didn't ask questions. They walked straight to the irrigation box behind the HOA Community Bulletin Board, the same one that had proudly declared Water Smart certified community since Turns out, they weren't smart enough to hide the evidence, because the text followed the line from the irrigation pump under the fence, along the hedgerow, and directly to the unauthorized Y-split on my bib. When they uncapped the junction and ran the trace, it was undeniable. The entire system had been sipping from my supply. The audit report was brutal. Pages of hourly logs, flow rate comparisons, a 6-month estimate showing that over 3,000 gallons had passed through my line, all routed to HOA maintenance. The kicker, they'd never filed a shared usage agreement. No backflow preventer, no inspection tags, and no legal claim. Karen's response? We believed it was a shared utility. The inspector raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, the pipe is attached to a residential hose bib on privately deeded property behind a 6-foot hedge. Karen tried to backpedal, claiming it was a long-standing maintenance shortcut for communal aesthetics. But when the inspector reviewed the footage and saw the fluorescent mist spray, the dripping bathrobe, the hand twist, he simply said, "Intent is evident." That phrase alone cost the HOA its Water Smart certification. The county froze their community budget pending reimbursement. Karen, she was issued a personal citation, $1,750 in fines and a mandatory municipal italics hearing. The next HOA newsletter didn't mention sustainability. No curb paint contests. No gardening with grace columns. Just one line, buried at the bottom of page 4. Water usage is under review. Please refrain from using unapproved sources. Poetic? Real. They drained my hose in silence. And now they were drowning in paperwork. A geyser of neon pink fluorescent spray launched straight into her chest, wrist and perfectly blown-out hair. She stumbled, yelped, slipped on the walkway and vanished behind the hedges. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then the room erupted. A gasp. Then chuckles. Then full laughter. Honest and cathartic. Karen stood, red in the face. Not from paint this time, but embarrassment. This is completely out of context. I raised a hand. The footage is time-stamped. The water usage is logged. The line traces from your irrigation hub to my faucet. You installed it, activated it, and got caught by your own surveillance obsession. This isn't out of context. It is the context. The city inspector in the back cleared his throat and stepped forward. As of today, the HOA is officially cited for unauthorized utility usage under County Water Code 12. The fine has been issued. Additionally, reimbursement is owed to the resident for a 6-month utility overdraw. The board may vote now. Diane looked like she wanted to crawl under the folding table. Karen, she just broke. I resign, she muttered, voice trembling. Effective immediately. The vote passed unanimously. Reimbursement approved. A new bylaw introduced on the spot. No HOA board member may access, repurpose, or draw from private residential water sources for community use or maintenance under any circumstance. The meeting adjourned early. The crowd filed out, still chuckling. Someone whispered, "Did you see the spray angle? Perfect shot." Outside, under the parking lot lamps, neighbors nodded to me for the first time. Not just polite nods, respectful ones. Because I hadn't yelled, I hadn't vandalized. I'd simply wired the truth into a hose. And let justice do what it does best. Flow back. I never thought peace would smell like tomatoes and faint latex paint. But here we are. My raised beds are full now. Heirloom squash curling around the trellis. Cherry tomatoes bright as signal lights. Basil thick enough to perfume the entire porch. The soil is rich. Water pressure steady. And every time I twist the spigot, I feel it. That quiet hum of control returning. The hose, the same vintage brass-bibbed one they thought was non-compliant, is right where it belongs. Coiled, clean, and mine. I water slowly now, not because I have to, but because I can. It's become a ritual. A silent reset. As I unwind the hose in the morning, I catch a glimpse of pink, faint, ghost-like streaks clinging to the poolhouse dome and the clubhouse corner camera. They've tried to scrub it off, pressure-washed it, even swapped out the front dome. But the others? They still blush under the sunrise. Just like Karen does. She walks by now with sunglasses on, even when it's overcast. No clipboard, no barking compliance reminders. She nods if our paths cross, but it's a nod that dips just enough. The way someone nods at a locked gate they used to own the keys to. She hasn't spoken to me since the meeting. She doesn't need to. Neither of us do. Justice didn't need a courtroom. It didn't need shouting or signatures or spotlights. It just needed a boundary and a little pressure. Since the incident, the HOA installed a formal usage request board. A literal one, wooden, varnished, community bulletin style. If anyone wants to borrow a tool, hose, or even rain barrel access, they write their name and date. It's old-fashioned, but oddly respectful. And for the first time, someone left a thank you note on my porch. Your mint is thriving. Appreciate the clipping. Lot 7. That's the kind of HOA I can live with. The cameras are still up, of course. But now they don't feel like they're watching. They feel like relics. Pompous little bubbles tinted just enough to remind everyone where the line is. A reminder that even the most self-righteous systems, the ones that hide behind bylaws and robes and borrowed water, can still get sprayed down when no one's looking. Sometimes justice roars. Sometimes it writes citations. And sometimes it just glows faint pink in the morning light. Subtle, humbling, unmistakable. I never aimed to humiliate anyone. I aimed to protect something. And now, every blossom in my garden, every spray from my hose, every knock on my door that comes with a mind if I use, they're proof that you don't have to burn a place down to reclaim your corner of it. You just have to let the pressure build and choose when to release it. I don't watch the cameras anymore. But I know they see me. And that's enough. Ever had your piece siphoned by someone with a clipboard and a smile? Around here, we don't just tell stories. We engineer poetic justice with pressure valves and pink paint. If you've ever been underestimated, outnumbered, or outmaneuvered, you're not alone. Stick with us because in this neighborhood, karma has excellent aim.